Okay, so we're recording. Welcome, Journey to Esquire, the podcast. We have with us Keita Brereton-Paul. She is with S&P Global Ratings. She's an Associate General Counsel and Corporate Secretary, but best of all, she's one of my besties. Whoop,
Hey!
whoop. So I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, the founder of Journey to Esquire Scholarship Leadership Program and the president of the Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit organization behind all of these great programs. We're here for another episode of Journey to Esquire, and Keita and I met in middle school. We have
10
known
years
each other
old.
for a long time. And I knew since I was 9 years old that I wanted to be a lawyer, but Keita had a different path. And so just like with all our other episodes, we're going to talk about her journey to Esquire, what her experiences was like, what she can share with you all about what you can do if you're interested in becoming an attorney. So whether you are a college student, even a high school student, we have some middle school students that we work with who are interested in becoming attorneys, or second career professional, or you thought you were going to be doing something else and now you're interested in the law, or you're currently in law school trying to figure out, what did I get myself into? Right? And we're going to also talk about some of the great things she does, some of her side hustles, because I'm a fan of side hustles and doing multiple things. And we're recording this during a time of pandemic, police brutality, protests. A lot is going on, so we'll touch on some of the things we are doing and that maybe you can do during this time, because this time has come again and again, every kind of decade or every 5 years now, we're facing these issues. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies we can use. So Keita, welcome.
Thank you.
So first, let's go back to the beginning. Why did you decide to become a lawyer?
So I was in my master's degree for public health, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. Because the first two things that I wanted to be, once I started exploring them, I decided that was not for me.
What were those two things?
So I wanted to first be a clinical neuropsychiatrist. I know. Then I wanted to be a clinical neuropsychologist. And then, so those both, I mean, they're closely related, but I took about a year off between undergrad and grad school to try to sort of figure myself out. And then I thought, perhaps I should pursue a degree in public health. So as part of my degree in public health, I had the opportunity to do an internship with the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. And while I was there, the people that I was most intrigued by were the attorneys. So I thought to myself, like, I could totally do this. This is related to health law, and I'll go to law school. I'll be a public health attorney. I'll be an advocate. It'll be something that I could be very passionate about. So I applied to law school while I was still in grad school. And my first semester of law school was also my last semester of grad school.
I didn't know that.
Yep. It's a lot.
It is. So talk about, because I'll put all this information in the show notes, but tell us, you have this international connection. So you're talking about undergrad and grad school and law school. So tell us, like, what schools did you go to and how did you end up in those different places?
Sure. So I went to undergrad in Canada, McGill University. My mother went to school there, spoke very highly of it. They also had a clinical neuropsychology program, so it was very interesting to me because it's kind of like an obscure field. And so it was very interesting to me that they had that program. But then on top of that, going to school in Canada with the exchange rate at that time, and just the overall cost because of the way that the Canadians handle education, was a fourth of the cost of going to school in the States. So whereas if I had gone to school in the US, it probably would have cost me between $30,000 and $40,000 a year to attend, just tuition. In Canada, it was $15,000 a year all in, right? Including room and board.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what, at the time I was there, the number 5 school in the world, right? So there were a lot of reasons to go. I had a lot of fun. And then the second university I went to was Florida International University in Miami. I did my first semester remotely, and then I moved down to Miami. And then my first year of law school, I was at St. Thomas University. And then I transferred to University of Miami my second year of law school.
Oh, wow. So we went from, well, you're a New York native like I am, and you're currently based in New York. You went to Canada, then you ended up in Florida, and then at 3 different law schools in Florida, South Florida.
2 different law schools and 1 grad school.
Yeah, so FIU, St. Thomas, and University of Miami, all great schools. And then now you're back in New York at S&P. So, wow. So tell us how you chose which law school, because it sounds like FIU let you work remotely the first semester, which is awesome, by the way. But then you overlapped graduate school and law school. That is a challenge. What made you apply to St. Thomas and then transfer to University of Miami?
I mean, I was applying late. And so, I mean, I decided quite randomly while I was in Geneva over the summer to apply to law school. So it wasn't this long drawn out plan. It was just like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. So most of the schools, their application process had ended. And St. Thomas at the time was either like a tier 3 or tier 4. I mean, but they had more opportunity to join late. And so that's what I did. So I went there.
And then, so you end up, was it the only school you applied to?
I applied there, and I applied to one other school. Maybe it was Brooklyn Law School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but
they had a later application.
They had a later application period, but it was complicated because, you know, I was still. Sorry,
That's okay.
I'm in New York City.
Yeah.
I was still finishing up my my master's degree, and I couldn't do first year law school remotely. Like, that just wasn't an option. I don't know if it's an option now, but it wasn't an option at the time that I was in law school. So it was easier for me to be in Miami.
Yes, that makes sense. And with the pandemic, actually, that's one of the questions that even the law school I work at now is trying to figure out. If we have an entering class in the fall and the buildings are still closed, how do you recreate this first semester experience? Because at Cooley, we have 3 full semesters every year. And it's rolling admission. You can start fall, summer, spring. And they chose not to have an entering class for the summer. It's typically smaller anyway, so it wasn't as huge of a sacrifice, but the fall is usually the big incoming class. And so all the law schools are trying to figure out, how do you do that? Can it be done remotely or online? And
what will be the impact, right, of it? Are you putting the students at a disadvantage? Are you really giving them because I mean, the first year of law school is really about retraining you on how to think like a lawyer. And can you really create that environment remotely? Maybe. But in trying to do that and test that out, you're making these first year students guinea pigs, right? Like, it could turn out very wonderfully, but if it doesn't, is it really their fault if they're not up to speed as quickly? And so, yes, that's one of the challenges. Some students want that too, because, for example, if you had that option, you would have taken it. Right? And so there are a lot of students who are saying, I need to be close to family. I don't want to get up and move right now. I just lost my job or got laid off. And so to be able to just log into a computer and do all this stuff will be a huge benefit to me. And so that's the challenge. Every decision being made right now by schools has pluses and minuses. They have the students who are happy to be remote and the ones who are just really want to get back into the building. And so it's a real challenge. One that, you know, no one's had to deal with before in recent times. So now you you applied to 2 schools. You started at St. Thomas. You did the typical application, the essay, you took the when did you take the LSAT, by the way? I must have taken it when I came back to New York before going to Japan. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about your international travel and how you managed to squeeze, work and regular life in like the rest of us. But,
Okay, so because you have to obviously take the LSAT in order to get into schools.
Yeah.
There is the trend now. There are a lot of schools that, at least for this term, are accepting the GRE
Instead, well, I already had
instead
the
of the
GRE,
LSAT. Yeah, because you were in grad school.
I was in grad school, but I definitely took the LSAT.
Okay.
But I don't think I wouldn't have taken it in Geneva, so I must have taken it like in that interim period when I came home. But it's a blip. It's kind of interesting, right?
It is.
The bar exam is way more imprinted into my brain than that, right?
That is a beast.
Yeah.
And I try to explain that to students. You know, I went to law school with someone who just on a whim took the LSAT because her friends were doing it. She had she's a genius. She had 2 bachelor's degrees. She was like 20. She's a really smart person. And so she could do that and did well. And I'm like, man, I paid $1,000 for a test prep and did okay.
Yeah,
and I did okay. I did well enough to get into law school, but not like really well where I had as many options as I wanted. So students tend to think the bar exam is like that. I'm like, no one walks into the bar exam and just wings it. Unless very few people can get away with that. And we're talking about people who took 3 years of law school and struggling. So, but okay, so now we're at St. Thomas. You do exceptionally well. So what is this decision to transfer to UM, and what was that like?
So I started to understand that the ranking of your school has a huge impact, right? And I also started to understand that it would benefit me greatly to also be in a school that has more access. And the head of career services at the time was a Black woman, and she was strongly recommending that if I were going to stay in Miami, that I go to University of Miami. The career services director at University of Miami was also a Black woman. And so she made sure that when I arrived, that I was very well taken care of. And so what's interesting about it, so I was like in the top percentage of the class. I booked 4 out of 5 courses my second semester. So, I was really, St. Thomas did not want me to go.
Yes. And being at a school like Cooley, which is also the unranked, we covet the students who are the very high performing students because they really help the other students. They help the reputation of the school.
Exactly. And that's how you change things around for a school, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I have to choose the opportunity that's best for myself versus the institution. So I went to University of Miami, and because the other career services director told the incoming one, look out for her. Okay. I think that I had a lot of guidance that I probably otherwise would not have had in law school. So, they made sure that I was put up for scholarships. They made sure that I participated in judicial internships. So I interned with both the federal district court judge as well as the Florida Supreme Court while I was in law school. And I put a lot of, I did well. So it was easier for them to put me up for these opportunities. But the simple fact that they were looking out for me means that I was even able to be aware that these opportunities were out there for me, because they accept very few students. And they made sure that they were my champions to give me exposure and opportunities. So that was very great. I also did very well at University of Miami. I spent a semester, so now we're on my 4th Florida school at Florida State University.
My alma mater. Yeah. Which was awesome because I got to visit you at University of Miami and sit in on your classes because I was considering it for myself as well. And I got to stay with you when you were in Tallahassee at Florida State. And I was invited down to meet with the dean, and that was great. And that's ultimately what I chose. So just our worlds continue to collide, and we support each other, and that's awesome.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, so that's great. So it's good to know that students, can have experiences at different schools. So even if you graduate from one school, you can visit other schools, so you can get access to things like judicial internships at the Florida Supreme Court or you can transfer if you end up decide that that's what's best for you. And again, I always recommend you have to figure out what's going to work for you. Like you said, your interests have to come before the institutions, right? Because the institution's interests for itself are coming before yours.
Yep.
So when I talk to students, that's what I always tell them. You have to figure out what's in your best interest. And remember, I work for the school. I'm going to want you to stay. I'm being very transparent about that. But, I'm also honest about helping you understand what's going to matter ultimately. And so for someone like you end up going to Dechert, this Am Law 100 firm in New York City. Even though you're from there, you and I both know being from there doesn't mean we're going to get preference. Yeah. I went to Fordham University undergrad, and I said, well, how many undergrad students do you accept into the law school? They're like, maybe one a year. And I'm thinking, whoa, what? But it's a top 25 law school. They can do that. It has the options. And so talk about how you now maneuvered from St. Thomas, University of Miami, visiting at FSU, back to your hometown, New York, at an Am Law 100 firm. How did that happen?
So that's actually an interesting story. So I was very active in NABALSA, the National Black Law Students Association. I was the national director of programming. And the year that I was the national director of programming, my final year, we decided we were going to pilot a job fair website. And the website was not perfect. And so I felt very responsible for assisting the local job fair coordinators, because NABALSA has a job fair in every region. So I went out there to New York to assist her, not really intending to interview. And as she was sorting through, I may have applied to like one or two firms, right? Like I was there primarily to work. And as she was sorting through the what do you call those things with the grades? I know it's bad.
I know you're out of the loop. I don't remember the stuff either. Because I'm back in academia. I'm like, oh yeah, transcripts, letters of reference, Oscar, all this, stuff that I forgot about a long time ago.
As she was sorting through the transcripts, there was unfortunately very few students that were at the top of their class. And so she decided to make the job fair look good that she was going to insert my application with a couple of large firms, right? Because it looks good for the job fair. So she actually inserted my name into Dechert's pile.
When you say she is the coordinator for that region?
For the Northeast Regional Job Fair.
Mm-hmm.
She actually inserted my name into that file. And so I went in exactly. And I got, from the names that she inserted me in with, I got 3 callbacks. People that I had not put myself up for at all. And so in the end, originally I was thinking of going to work in Atlanta. And I had lived in Atlanta my second year and decided that it just was not for me. But
I was there for a summer associate position, and I was just like, nope.
Like, this is not it. This is not it.
They should be New Yorkers. Their infrastructure needed a lot of help.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's improved since then, but the traffic issues and the water and the infrastructure is just not there.
It was a
lot. Large city.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. So but I did have an offer. So it's not like I didn't have a job.
I did too. Yeah, I turned down the offer. I'm just not doing Atlanta. So thank you. No thanks.
It's like, let's see what else I can do. Right. So ultimately, I decided out of the companies that I interviewed with that Dechert was the right choice for me. And that's how I ended up at that firm. It's kind of interesting. So I give a lot of credit to my friend who was the job fair coordinator, because she really decided that, hey, let's lift you up and put you in these slots because you are the type of person that they're looking for. So yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to understand that when you're a law student. What are these firms really looking for? And I tell people, hey, I worked at a big firm and I had an interesting story about how I got that job. Similar way, like it's just coincidence. I knew somebody would just drop my resume because they needed a resume,
Yep.
And then you just end up being at the right place at the right time and fit a profile. And that profile for big law firms is top 5, 10, 15, I think I was top 15% at the time. Law review or some journal, mock trial or moot court, and they just need those boxes checked.
That's exactly right. I was top 5% international law review. And so it was, everything that they wanted to see. So my friend said, we're just gonna put you in here.
So we just, we want to emphasize to students, you are a whole person and bring a lot to the table, but certain jobs, if those boxes aren't checked, they're not going to give you a look, especially not at the beginning. Yep. Maybe once you have certain kinds of experience as a practicing attorney, you're going to bring something else to the table. And I have attorneys who I've talked to who have that experience, But, it's just, if you understand and accept it and don't take it personally, just know it's going to be a different path for you. That's all. But if you want that big law firm job, you got to get into those things early. Get into law review, oral journal, get into moot court or mock trial. People who've done both. Yeah. Take every opportunity to get competitions.
Judicial internships are also helpful.
Judicial internships. I didn't get to do that because I needed money. Those internships did not pay. I needed paying jobs. But if you have the opportunity, do that and get involved with those student orgs. Don't just join. Like she said, she was the national coordinator for the job fair and was helping. And so putting her resume in was a no-brainer for the coordinator there. And I was involved in Southern region of the Black Law Students Association. I went to that big 40th anniversary event they had. Outstanding event. And I kept trying to recruit people, and some people because they looked at their school's BALSA and thought, or their school org of a version of their national org, and they limited their view to only who they saw in the club. It's like, this is a national organization. Whether it's the Hispanic bar, Black bar, Asian bar, federal bar, whatever, practice group bars, you want to tap into that statewide or national organization because that's where the connections really get made.
Yep.
And, we know people from that. Yeah, is it Michael Sterling? Didn't he run for office, or is he he
was the national chair of NABALSA when I was the national director of programming.
Right.
And, he went to a large law firm and then went to go work for the mayor of Atlanta, the former mayor of Atlanta. But the thing about these organizations, which for me is the most powerful, is now that I see everyone, particularly those who were in leadership positions then, it's an early indicator of where they're going to end up afterward, right? So many of the people who I was in NABALSA with are mayors of cities. They are legislators in various places across the country. You see some of them on television.
Yes.
Like Angela Rise and NABALSA alum. Right? So the connections that you make in these organizations, particularly those that have regional or national impact, are significant. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is the judicial internship that I did was during the year, which is why I was at Florida State. And so you can still get a summer job or summer internship, and then during the semester, if you're not working during the semester, do a judicial internship as well. So there are options.
There are options, yes. And so when professors are advocating for it, just take a look, because some professors were advocating clerkships to me, and I'm like, I'm not about this clerkship life. Yeah. I don't know. And of course, I end up clerking for 5 years. Yeah. So you never know. Sometimes you need someone who explains it in a way that you will understand the benefit. And I think that's where the disconnect was. They understood the bigger picture, but I'm first generation law student. Big firms, I didn't even know names of, I had no concept of it. I had glimpses from my Clio program, which is another awesome program. But sometimes you need to just find someone who can translate it for you. And so you, like you said, you made sure to say, those two career directors were Black women. So they knew the big picture and how to pitch it to you.
Yep.
And so that's what we're trying to do with this podcast here. So great. So let's so we talked about your job search and application and why you became a lawyer. Let's take one little step back. Did you enjoy law school?
I did.
Good.
I did enjoy law school. I mean, it was arduous, right? It was a lot of work, but I felt successful in. I mean, it's easier to enjoy when you're doing well, but it was a comfortable place for me. It was a really comfortable place for me, and the activities that I was involved in were very exciting. I mean, there were definitely some courses that I preferred not to take.
Yeah, property. Well, you ended up doing real estate, so maybe property was.
Well, I booked my real estate course, so I love property law. I did not like con law. I did not like civil procedure. I did not like criminal procedure.
Wow.
I did not like health law, which is what I went to law school for.
It's interesting. You might be interested in a topic, but the practice of it looks very different than just talking about it or reading about it. And so with con law, you're very interested, I'm sure, in First Amendment rights and freedom of speech and protest and how the government operates and everything. But the practice of it is like, oh, this is what I gotta go through?
Yeah, it's like,
this is a long-term plan. You might be in these cases for years before you get any kind of ruling, and it's very gray. Yeah. And it's interesting you don't like the stuff I teach, criminal law, criminal law. I try to make it interesting.
Criminal law. I didn't mind criminal law, but criminal procedure, I was not a fan of. And I was not a fan of civil procedure either.
Yeah. No one is until they have to practice. And you're like, oh, this stuff is useful. That is one of the more useful classes if you're a litigator. But if you're not, then not so much. So that's good. Yeah, I remember, if I might share, when I went to visit your University of Miami, you're at the pool, reading and studying. And I'm like, this is the life. This is what law school is. And then I'm like, how are you even at the pool with all this noise? And you're just one of those people who could study like that. And I'm like, I need to be in a room where it's quiet, some peaceful music in the background.
I'm sitting on the beach often, okay?
Which is a good life. So, hey, but I did end up in Tallahassee because Miami was so expensive. And I was like,
but they gave me my second year. So my first year wasn't that expensive because St. Thomas wasn't that expensive. But University of Miami is an expensive school. And because I transferred in, I wasn't eligible for grants and funding. Plus I had to prove myself, right? So my second year, I did very well. I was my second year, I was like in the top 2% of the class, right? Wow. And so they found money. My whole entire last year was paid for. No, I had no tuition responsibility, right? So I ended up really, my most significant year in terms of the amount of money I had to pay was my second year of law school. That worked out. I mean, my graduate degree was also free. I should tell that story one day.
Yeah, we're going to hit up on that round 2 of the podcast. We have a lot of things to talk about. But yeah, I mean, that is one of the considerations students have to think about, the ultimate cost of your degree.
And it matters. I mean, you're not thinking about it when you're in school, but really how much student loans you have to pay back limits what you can do with your future, right? Because you have to think about, how am I going to afford this debt burden? And so there are a lot of people who are in jobs that they can't stand because it pays them what they need to be paid in order to manage their expenses, right? Or to get loans forgiven or whatever. And so to the extent that you could set yourself up to some extent to reduce that as a consideration in your future, it's tremendously helpful.
Yes, it is. And that's why I chose FSU.
Yeah.
But not only was the tuition a third of my... Yes, in state. I was out of state for the first year though, because I fell short by 1 month of the establishing domicile. But even I did the math. Even with that, it was overall cheaper. Yeah. And then Tallahassee was just a much less expensive place to live in.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying with Miami. I mean, it's a private school in Miami, so it's no surprise it's expensive. But just to live there, I'm like, where was I even going to live? And I remember that hour-long commute, and you were so excited because you could be in the HOV lane because I was in the car with you. And I'm like, no.
But it was a good place to learn how to drive. I went to Miami, I did not know how to drive. And when I first started driving down to South Campus, so I lived up north because my classes were supposed to be on the North Campus. Oh. So when I arrived, they're like, good news, we've moved to South Campus. So I would have had a 10-minute commute had stayed on North Campus, but it ended up being an hour-long commute. And I was deathly afraid of driving on the highway. And so being in 5-mile-an-hour traffic in Miami was optimal for a non-driver like me.
Yeah, I learned to drive in Brooklyn and the Bronx, so I'm ready to deal with that kind of driving. I prefer not to, though, because now I live, in Central Florida, and we not about that crazy driving life. People actually signal and wait to, let you in, and in New York, you know how it is. You just got to get in where you fit in.
Miami too.
Well, that's why I was like, no, I'm not going back to this. Yeah, but you learned some things. But yes, it was a good experience for you, especially because you weren't paying as much as so. But that was awesome. And then, so now you're at Dechert, right? And we haven't talked about your area of practice yet. So a lot of people, I always ask this because when I was in law school, I'd say ask the lawyers at places I interviewed and where I interned, so how'd you pick your area of practice? And a lot of them said, it's just where they needed me and I just stuck with it, and it's just there's no passion or interest. It's like, it's just what I know now. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not about that life. I was not put on this earth to do what was convenient to other people. Like in the beginning, yes, but we're talking about people 10 years out still doing that because that's where
they once they're like deeply into an area to exit. And so I know that happened to quite a few people that went in, and what they typically do is it's like a vanity show. You have choices for your different practices, and whoever you rank highest with is the group that you go into. But I wasn't interviewing that way. I was interviewing as a 3L. Typically when you go through a summer program, they have that ranking system, and then you get put into the one that the practice that has the greatest need. But as a 3L, you go in and you tell them, this is what I want to do, or at least the firms that I interviewed with, and they see whether or not they have a need in that group. And so I had decided, after realizing that I was not going to be a public health lawyer, that, what 2 courses or areas of law did I enjoy the most in law school? And that was tax law and real estate law. And at the time, every place that I looked at being employed by said that they would need me to get an LLM to do tax law. And so I was like, that's it. I'm on my 3rd degree. We're not getting any more degrees. Right? So I'm like, I guess it's real estate law. And so that's how I ended up in the real estate and finance department. But I'm not a real estate lawyer, which is kind of interesting. And so what happened was I started law school in September 2007. And the economy was slowing down then. And by the time we entered into first quarter 2008, we were in the midst of the Great Recession. And so the Great Recession in particular hit real estate, which means that the opportunity to really work on real estate transactions was greatly diminished. So what that meant is, because I was in the finance and real estate group, I had the opportunity to work on finance transactions, specifically around the area of asset-backed securities. And so when the economy started to come back and more real estate transactions were available for me to work on, I realized that I was more challenged by the finance work than I was by the real estate work. And when it came time to choose, I chose finance over real estate.
Oh, look at that. So that's how you end up now at S&P doing these kind of international finance transactions and ratings, particularly in Latin America. And so you are Panamanian-American and speak Spanish. speaker, so those language skills definitely kicking in and making a difference. You know, I had to put Panama in there real quick.
Right.
All right. So what advice now would you offer to new and future law students thinking about law school? Now that you're over a decade out, you're looking back and said, man, I wish I knew this one or two things. What would you say?
So I would say pay attention to your passions, right? The areas of law that really drive you, right? And any opportunity that you get to test out whether or not what you think you want to do is really what you want to do, seize that, right? Because as I talk to lawyers now who are not happy with their career choice, there is, to some extent, a lack of passion for what it is that they were doing. So it feels like they wasted their time. But if you are in an area where you have excitement or passion for what it is that you're doing, then it's never going to feel like a bad decision. So that's part one. Part two, watch your coins. Meaning that part of having a career is building a bit of wealth for yourself to have a comfortable or phenomenal retirement. And then also, depending on whether or not you have any dependents going forward, building a legacy for your family. And so a part of that is being very cognizant of what your financial outlook is, how you're adding to growing wealth for yourself versus taking away from that. And that comes in a variety of ways. That comes from making sure that you're doing what you can to reduce the debt that could possibly come out of something. Also, looking at whether or not you're saving or investing or giving yourself the opportunity to engage in things that can be lucrative for you personally. And just overall tracking your progress, because sometimes just having a plan in place makes a huge difference.
Very good advice.
One more thing. Network. Oh my goodness, just network as much as you can. Because quite honestly, especially now, it's been very valuable to be able to just call someone and say, hey, I need this. What do you know about that? I have this issue. Do you know someone? It's been one of the most valuable things to me about the relationships that I developed in law school. And so it's a lot easier to ask somebody for something or for advice when you've known them for a decade, when you've been in the trenches with them in class or in a student organization, because they know who you are outside of everything else. So I would say networking is extremely important with your colleagues, your fellow law students, because you just never know where someone's going to end up, including yourself. So, yeah,
that's true. I didn't, again, judicial clerkship professor, that wasn't on my plan at all. I was going to be, sorry for the background noise.
I was going to my New York City noise too.
Yeah, I'll edit it out later. I was going to be a criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney, the work like the Ben Crump. And, I know Ben Crump from when I was at FSU. He's never remembered me because Ben Crump and Darryl Parks were so active with BOSA. And with FSU, their alma mater, every year they'd invite us to their offices. I mean, so they've met a ton of students, but I remember meeting them and hearing their story. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. And it just never came to fruition, despite my greatest efforts. But
there's still time.
Never know. There's still time. There is still time. I see it as I'm helping train the future students who want to do this. Hopefully, I'll recover from the burnout of my litigation experiences, because litigation can burn you out.
Yeah. Yep.
It burned me out.
Large law firms can burn you out too.
Yeah, because I was at a large law firm, but yours is even larger. It was international. Mine was just in one office in the city, but it had 40 plus attorneys, so it was considered large. It had billable hours. I was working 7 days a week. I had demanding clients, et cetera, et cetera. They pay you well and they expect your time in exchange.
Yep.
And then as a judicial clerk for a federal judge, our courts here are really busy. Really busy. And so, that was demanding. And then I couldn't speak out because when you work for a judge, you're
supposed to be not seen.
I'm unseen, and I can't do anything the judge can't do. So I can't support any candidate for anything. I can't speak out on any national issues. I can't be vocal, and that was so hard for me, and I did it for So
it was a preoccupation. In some ways, my job is like that now because I have a lot of access to material non-public information.
Right.
And so because of that, I have to be very cautious because the penalty is imprisonment and fines, right?
Yeah.
But like securities fraud and insider trading, these are very real things. So I'm not built for that kind of life. Right?
I am not meant for, no, none of that. Yeah, for me, it was compromising federal cases. If I revealed some information by accident that was non-public about a case, or if I had an opinion about a case and then the person says they were biased.
Basis for an appeal. So
yeah.
Interesting. I mean, that's also an interesting point to mention to students. Like if you feel like these types of things would be too much pressure on you, just be mindful of that before you enter into certain spaces, that there might be these kinds of limitations and which could be positive, right, in a grand scheme of things. But if it's something that is going to truly negatively affect your spirit, you might want to think about that twice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had to advocate for some things I really did not believe in. They were within the law and they were what my clients wanted, but I thought, oh, y'all serious right now? You want to argue this? Okay. And the judges would give me these dirty looks, and I'm like, now, judge, you know how this works. That doesn't mean I personally believe that, but I would always say the law allows my client this remedy, and that's the one they're seeking. And I'm like, it's not personal. I'm not trying to attack this person. And I did debt collection, which was tough because I grew up in a single family home, 4 kids. My dad left, did not support us. And my mom was always perpetually behind on her bills, despite working overtime and getting the job that paid the most that she could get her hands on. And so, it was tough for me. I ended up, collecting from a lot of single moms who were in a similar situation to my mom. But I had to always present the case in a way that was non-judgmental. And I had to remind my colleagues too. These people aren't bad people. They just falling behind on their bills. Do not pass judgment. And they're just people who've never had to experience that. So they can't even imagine not paying a bill on time. I'm like, because you always had money flowing. I don't there's people who don't have money flowing, right? So
and then you get aggravated. I mean, that's also an interesting thing. I had a colleague while it was my first year of practice that said to me that the problem with the U.S. education system is that Latino people refuse to learn English. I had to walk out of the room. Out of the room and recompose myself. But what's interesting, particularly when you're in these when you're in these, and interestingly enough, this was because we were generally having a conversation about the fact that Sotomayor was about to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. But oftentimes when you're in these spaces where there are not a lot of people that look like you, have your background, the same background as you are faced with situations where people never really had to critically think about conditions of others. And you're oftentimes also put in the position of sort of being the educator or explainer or internal advocate within a space for a more productive solution. And so it can be tough, right? Because you're learning how to be you're learning at the same time as everybody else to just be a lawyer, right? But at the same time, sometimes you also have to separately become like a human rights advocate to some extent. And so it's particularly in law firms, which is kind of interesting. And it's something that I struggled with in the very beginning until I decided that was not my role. Is that in large law firms, there is currently a dearth of people of color, right? There's not that many Black, Brown, Asian attorneys in large law firms. And with the advent of diversity and inclusion, there has been sort of interest in dipping your toe and learning how to expand that out. But then they're like, okay, we would like you to help us. So now, while everybody else gets to be a regular lawyer and just learn and engaging in the practice of law, you also have this additional responsibility weighed on you to try to increase the flow through the pipeline, right? And as a result, now you have less time to learn your craft, and then you still have the competing guilt of, I really should be assisting to change this space. Because wouldn't it be phenomenal if somebody had done that for me coming into this? So there's a lot of things to think about when you are, not to scare anybody, not to scare anybody, but it's real. Like it's a real part of the experience, and you need to do things to manage your psyche and your mental health, because there's only one you, and you need to make sure that you're as strong as possible to accomplish the things that you want for your life. So that's the second part of it. So that's what I had to learn early on. The second part of it is I had to understand the difference between the goals that I had for myself and the goals that the institution had for me. And quite often people will drag you into things because it's beneficial for their institution, right? But is it really the right thing for you to do? And so you have to be, hyper focused on making sure that you're on the path toward your dream, because that's how you're most at peace, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree. There's so much we can dive into, but that's going to be 2.0. No reason why we can't do this again. It's been so much fun. So we're going to talk about a couple more things. Like you said, we are interested in different aspects of diversity with Journey to Esquire, and making sure we touch on all these different arenas that are really important for students to think about now, to position themselves to get involved in. And you want to talk about political careers and running for elected office, which it's always important, but whenever there's protests and decisions being made, we have to remind people that the people making these decisions are elected to their office.
Yep.
And in order for them to get elected to office, they had people who supported their campaigns financially, who knocked on doors, who put up signs, that very few people are actually showing up to vote. And so we always want to hold these people accountable after they've been elected and made a decision, but we must also be proactive in making sure there's a steady flow of candidates to consider and to vote for and support, so that a variety of people are in position to help make just and fair decisions and have the perspective of everyone who is affected by these decisions. So tell us, spread the wisdom about political careers, running for elected office as a person of color, as a Latina, as a woman, just as a lawyer, just all the perspectives we have to share.
And so it's interesting. So I am very politically involved, although I don't have any intention of running for public office. And the reason that I do that is because, particularly on the local level, the actions that these people take affect your everyday life. And without access to the information about what kinds of decisions are being made on the local level, you could very well end up in a situation where things are being decided against your personal interests, right? And so because of that, particularly when I was at a large law firm, less now than I'm at a rating agency, I spent a lot of time going in and speaking to politicians, volunteering for community service events, having discussions about, particularly in the context of different organizations that I was volunteering for, what was important to the organization and what kinds of resources were available within either a legislative office or an executive branch of city government that could help the organizations that I was involved with. And what that did was tremendously helpful in that it helped me to understand the structure of government systems in my city, and it helped me to understand that there are a lot of resources out there that can be made available to you, but oftentimes you cannot access them unless you have already developed a relationship with the relevant parties involved. And even if your particular senator or city council person or assembly person is not the person who is the ultimate decision maker, they can go and knock on their colleague's door and assist you with advancing what it is that you need to have advanced. So, in addition to trying to get your preferred candidate in office and supporting those initiatives and fundraising to the extent you can so people remember your name, you have to also regularly follow up, right? And make sure that you understand what's going on so that you're staying informed about how things might be impacting your everyday life. So like, for example, in New York, there's this law that they're trying to overturn, 50A, right? In connection with the protests. And that's a law that prevents you from accessing a police officer's record who may have been accustomed to using excessive force, right? So somebody lobbied for that. Probably at the police union. Somebody made sure that their interests were being served, and they went in and they made sure that happened, right? Because they understood that for their interests that was important. Now, can you imagine if there was a significant lobbying force on the other side, someone who was paying attention and made sure that it didn't happen? Right? So these are the types of things that you have to think about. You don't necessarily need to be in public office yourself, right? To be aware and involved. And so, particularly in these times, people are talking about these things very often, but even outside of circumstances of civil unrest, this is your everyday life. Like, you need to be informed about what's going on and what these people who have been elected to serve you have the opportunity to do to make sure that your community is well supported. Those are my thoughts.
Very good. And I take a similar position. I am not interested in running for any office. I get up sometimes and I make these speeches and everyone's like, "Are you running for office?" I'm like, "No, I have no interest in running for office, campaigning, raising funds, peddling, platforms, and I just want to be me everywhere I go." And when I have friends who are running for office, man, it's like you're on eggshells and you're constantly on this line, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I want to advocate for people to run. Those who do want to run, I want to support them financially on social media. I was at a photo shoot I broke the quarantine for the first time in however many weeks just to help my friend with a photo shoot who's running for a judge. And, I think that he'd be an excellent judge, but I also think he's so open to ideas and other people's experiences that he will bring all that with him to the bench. And then you have these people who are on the bench who've never had these other experiences. And it's some of the things that they say, you're like, what? Did you not know that other people are having different experiences?
Yeah, it's tragic because then there's less empathy.
There
right?
is a lot less empathy. You hear judges say, well, that person, like the Brock case, oh, he reminded me of myself when I was a young man. Well, all these other people are reminding you of you, so that means they get no empathy?
Yep. Yeah. I mean,
That's
that's what
not right.
happened. That's
Yeah, but
what
that's what
happened.
actually happens. Yes, I
Yeah.
know. And so, so I broke the quarantine just for that. And but I think it's important because if I have power just by being present in those pictures, because I'm a Black woman, then cool. Then
Yeah.
and if I wrote a check also, and I'll write checks for other people every time I can. And I will share their stuff on social media and then you know what? The reality is that the last elections, a lot of my family members said, there's all these judges on here. Who are these people? Who should I vote for? Just tell me.
Well,
That's the power we have as lawyers in our families.
It's true. It's very, very true. And then also you have the power to educate them that, yes, this is not the presidential election, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go out there and vote, right? There's a lot of the local elections impact your life way more than the national, right? So, I mean, it's a combination of things, but it's extremely important to your everyday life. Like these are the decisions that impact your everyday life on a larger level.
Yes. And then I think the biggest lie that was perpetuated after the Civil War was that your vote doesn't matter.
Yep.
The minute the vote became available to more people and they kept trying to stop other people from voting, and then all these laws had to get passed, the federal laws to enforce it, they started to sell this idea that your vote doesn't matter. Now they don't even have to stop people from voting. They just don't show up.
Exactly.
And it's tragic.
It's very tragic. Very tragic.
But we'll stop short of there because we are a nonprofit, and so we can't advocate for any particular positions. We're nonpartisan. Just want to put that disclaimer out there. We're talking about voting generally, and that's why I didn't name the person I was supporting. Not meant as a campaign talk for him. But let's talk about one more fun thing. So you travel internationally, and you've been to 60 plus countries.
That's right.
Wow. Talk to us about Travel Becomes Me and your fun traveling around the world.
Sure. So Travel Becomes Me is my social media platform / website where I teach people how to substantially reduce the cost of travel so that it could be more accessible to do more frequently. And I started traveling very young. Probably my first trip was back to my family's home to Panama. But I spent some time growing up traveling. And so it was always kind of like in my spirit. But then after I was responsible for paying myself.
Yes, when we have to pay, it's like, hold on, this isn't.
And particularly after leaving a large law firm to go in-house. So I took a pay cut, right, to go in-house. Beforehand, I was traveling once a quarter internationally. And I thought to myself, like, how am I going to make this work? Now that I'm taking this pay cut, I'm not really too pleased about not traveling as often. That doesn't sound great to me. I could stay, but then that really wasn't where my spirit was either. Or I could try to figure out how to make it happen, right? With where my resources were at the time. And as it turned out, as I was learning and educating myself on how to reduce costs, I had reduced costs so much that with my pay cut, I could travel once a month internationally instead of the 4 times a year that I was going.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I thought to myself, like, this is crazy. There were so many resources out there to substantially reduce the cost of travel that, like, I can't be the only person that knows this information. And so I started to teach people what I knew so that they can have these experiences themselves. And then the other thing that also was a driving force behind that. So when I would so I prefer to travel to luxury locations because while I was a lawyer in a law firm, I wasn't going to go and struggle on my 2 days off anywhere. Just was not happening. And so I wanted to upkeep that kind of lifestyle even after the pay cut. And what would be sad is that I would be in these spaces that, quite often are used to seeing wealthy people, and they would just assume that I must be a movie star, or my boyfriend at the time, husband, must be some kind of sports athlete, or in music, because those are the people that we see here. And particularly after I made the transition, I realized how inexpensive it could be. I was like, that shouldn't be what people assume. More people should be able to do this because it's accessible. So that was the other part of it.
Okay, so we're all about access. So I
Yes.
like that. So tell our listeners where they can go again to get more information about Travel Becomes Me.
Sure. On Instagram and Facebook, it's at Travel Becomes Me, or facebook.com/Travel Becomes Me, Instagram.com/Travel Becomes Me. And then my website is KitaBrereton.com. So if you look in the show notes, you'll see the spelling of my name.
It'll be in the show notes. Yeah, make sure that they have the links. And like I said, we're going to have a 2.0 because this was a great conversation. There's a lot of things we didn't cover, and I'd love to. And I'm so glad to have this upbeat moment during everything that is going on. Deciding to have joy and happiness in spite of everything can be a revolutionary act.
Absolutely.
That's what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, dear. I love you. Hope to see you soon.
You.
Muchos besos. I know air hugs.
Yes.